My name is Johnny. I'm alcoholic.
Hi, Johnny.
I thought for a minute Matt had forgot who I was. But I'll remind him. Singleness of Purpose is the fuel that keeps Alcoholics Anonymous going. It's a thing that's probably perpetuated Alcoholics Anonymous since 1935, when two alcoholics got together, and Bill talked to Bob about his struggles with alcohol and his attempt to recover from it, and it was an identification. And singleness of purpose to me means basically that there is an identification that has to happen here for the alcoholic of my type to be ready to engage in this process of recovery in Alcoholics Anonymous, which is probably a lifetime basis thing that you do here. And somewhere in the early 1970s, Alcoholics Anonymous got in bed with the treatment facilities and the courts, and all different various types of people started coming to Alcoholics Anonymous under the disguise of alcoholic and this and alcoholic and that, and somehow or other the message or the continuation of this singleness of purpose has been watered down to make some people believe that anybody can come here and recover from whatever it is that ails them, whether it's gamblers or overeaters or drug addicts or whatever it may be. And I don't believe that by the acceptance of this stuff and the overlooking of it that we do anybody any favor of that at all. As a matter of fact, sometimes I think it chills more people than it helps. You know, I'm given a privilege every year of going back to one of the penitentiaries that I was in to talk at a banquet with 300 or 400 guys, and inside of a state institution they have a thing, they combined AA and NA in those two things. And now I sit there and they have two people who give short talks from NA and then me, and I sit there, and although I use an awful lot of drugs in my lifetime before I come to Alcoholics Anonymous, I have no identification with this other program. And it's the most amazing thing is because there doesn't seem to be any recovery there. There never seems to be anything other than the fact that they just don't use drugs anymore. And I sponsor some people who go to NA, and some of them are AA members and they go to NA. But to me, the meat and potatoes of this is that anybody can become a drug addict. It doesn't take much. I mean, all it takes is an injection of drugs in your system, and sooner or later, but once that's taken care of, there's no necessity for anything else. But what about this seemingly baffling, deadly, soul-destroying thing called alcoholism? At least the alcoholism that I'm afflicted with. It's an illness of a spiritual nature, our co-founder wrote about in our book. He says it's a malady of a spiritual illness. It needs a spiritual answer for a spiritual program, and so that's why it reaches way down deep inside of it. It's just like I was telling you last night, my problem today, like it's always been, has never been drinking. It's always been being sober. And I got to find some way to live in a world with the same results that I thought alcohol gave me when I took a drink of it every day of my life. And through the process of Alcoholics Anonymous and the continuation of identification in Alcoholics Anonymous and this singleness of purpose that's been drummed into my head from my earliest recollection of Alcoholics Anonymous, it seemingly has given me some way to live comfortably in a world that I really probably will never belong to fully. And that's only because when I sit in my early meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous, I didn't identify with a lot of things because I was so closed-minded and so into myself and so wrapped up into my little sick images that I had built around myself in 20 years that it's hard to break through that facility. But what was there was a feeling that I've come to recognize is it only happens between one alcoholic and another alcoholic. It's not necessarily what's being said. It's the identification. There's something between you and I that I never felt for anybody else before. There's something that happened. I couldn't put my finger on it. I couldn't do it. There was a kind of like an attachment, you know, and I fought it and used all kinds of excuses to keep it away from me. But I didn't fully recognize it until I got into this process of recovery and got rid of the self-centeredness enough for the words of these alcoholics to get through to me and to get this singleness of purpose, that it was an alcoholic talking to another alcoholic. You know, in the book Alcoholics Anonymous, an alcoholic wrote down his experience in his recovery process. And in so doing, he identified with what's wrong with people like me. And then he went on to explain to us, as was read here tonight, this morning, what the process is to recover. In the 12 and 12, which is not one of my favorite books, but there's a paragraph in the last paragraph of step 1 in the 12 and 12. It says very simply, under the lash of alcoholism, we're driven to AA, here to discover the fatal situation that we're involved in. Maybe that's not verbatim. And we stand ready to do anything which will remove us from this murderless obsession. Anything. Those, to me, are requirements for sobriety and recovery in Alcoholics Anonymous. Willing to stand and do anything. Now, how in the world would I know what to do here other than just read a few books, take a few problems here? How do I know how to do it? What I do, I sit in meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous and identify with what's going on there. I get lost in meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous. I sit alongside of my sponsor every Wednesday night. I've been sitting there for 28 years, I guess. And I am just absolutely lost in what I hear in Alcoholics Anonymous meetings, unless it's a problem that I do not identify with. And what would that be? That would be something other than alcoholism and a recovery from it. I'm not sitting in Alcoholics Anonymous meetings to hear about how much cocaine you stuck up your nose or wherever you stuck it up. I just... Did you identify with that, my prince? Because I have no qualms at all about walking up to somebody and telling them, why don't you go to NA? Did you ever drink? Well, once in a while. But last time I was out, I went and got loaded. I said, why don't you go to NA? Maybe they can help you. Obviously, you're not getting any help here. You see, my main purpose for Singleness of Purpose is to help the alcoholic, the way I was helped. It took me a while to uncover and discover the very nature of my situation anyhow, because there were so many layers of insanity on top of me, and self-centeredness and image building and hiding out and justification of all these kind of things. It's hard to get past that layer of self-centeredness that was bent on me to clear my mind enough to have a little of it seep in there. But once I got the idea of what was wrong with me, and I come to the grip with the idea that what I have, this thing called alcoholism, what I have is, I have a day to reprieve every day from a life and death situation. And what a lot of people don't seemingly understand today as they come to Alcoholics Anonymous, because they've been cushioned for something, I guess, or patted on the head, is that this is a deadly illness. a deadly that kills people. I guess there isn't a week go by that we sit in our meeting on Wednesday night and we don't hear about somebody who was doing well in Alcoholics Anonymous, who died of an overdose, or they died of their own vomit, or whatever they did. It's just, it is a deadly thing. It's serious illness. It drives you insane or kills you or does whatever it does. And it doesn't take much. It just takes this idea of no identification. If you don't have any identification, you won't stay here. If you don't have this idea out of your head that my case is different, and that's where that thing comes in, my case is different. That's why identification is so very important. So very important. So where do you get the knowledge about all this kind of stuff, and how do you know what to do? You watch what goes on in AA. You don't have to be a genius to sit in meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous and watch the process being used over here and how it's been kind of watered down and pushed out the door over here. You know, a young lady read up here, rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path. In some areas, the path has turned into a canal that's been so watered down, for God's sake. I mean, it's amazing to me to sit and hear these meetings. But where I go to meetings, and why I go to meetings, is because my sponsor insists that I be of service to Alcoholics Anonymous, that I pass on this message of singleness of purpose, of one alcoholic helping another alcoholic, that no matter how long I've been sober, it's a necessity for me to show the newcomers that alcoholics, no matter how long they've been sober, still have to engage in this service and this process of recovery, or they'll think somewhere along the line that it isn't necessary to continue to do it on a daily basis, which signs their death warrant if they're alcoholic. I don't know anywhere. I have Monday night meeting. I put the chairs away. I stand over in the corner and put the chairs away. Many of you seen me do it. There's not a Monday goes by that some starry-eyed newcomer straggles up to me and looks at me and says, "You've been sober all these years, and you still have to put away the chairs?" I said, "Yeah, I put my butt in one. Why shouldn't I want to pick it up?" It's amazing. It's amazing. You know, I make coffee for our meeting on Wednesday night. Best job in A. We got more sobriety on our coffee crew than they have in some states, for Christ's sake. But that is another example of singleness of purpose, the best I know how to tell you. You know, I don't want to really get into it too deep, because then I'll start taking his stuff away from him, and he'll have to stand here and talk down to me for a couple of minutes. But it's really true. It's one alcoholic talking to... It says in this book, alcohol is a cunning, baffling foe. It doesn't say that alcohol and anything is a cunning, baffling foe. There's nothing in our book, Alcoholics Anonymous, that says alcoholic and anything. And even the moment that "and" comes in there, that's a conscious or unconscious separation from. That's just saying, that may be all right for you, but I'm an "and," and I'm different. I may have to do it that way. If you're alcoholic, like I'm alcoholic, there's only been one successful program for the recovery from alcoholism in the history of this illness called alcoholism, except for a brief moment in the 1800s. And that perished on the way because they got out of their singleness of purpose too. So if you're new here in Alcoholics Anonymous, I hope you find whatever's wrong with you, the answer to it. There's an answer. If you're an alcoholic, welcome. Come on in and sit down and join us and get you a little job, and find somebody who will lead you into the path of this fellowship and show you how to operate and go on around here. And then maybe someday you'll sit around and understand the great rewards that the program of Alcoholics Anonymous and its actions has to offer you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Johnny. And I'd like to introduce Clancy from Los Angeles, California.
My name is Clancy Imislund, and I'm an alcoholic. Matt? Matt, where are you? You still here? There you are. I knew that. I meant Adam. Adam. Where are you, Adam?
Stand up, Adam.
Get me some coffee.
He's serious.
I'm not kidding. Jesus. When I was his age, well, I can't remember what happened. Anyway, I'm very glad to be here this morning. I don't know why I was thinking of this when they were reading chapter 5. I don't know why this popped in my mind, but I thought you'd like to know where that custom came from. In 1939, a woman in New York was very thrilled because her brother had gotten sober at AA. And she got a copy of the manuscript, and she was coming to Los Angeles. And so she advertised in the Los Angeles paper, "Ladies, do you have husbands who have a drinking problem? There's now an answer. Call this number." And she set up a deal. She rented a room at the Hotel Cecil on the edge of Skid Row. And on this Sunday, in September of 1939, 12 women showed up, leading 12 men, And they came in, and she said, "Oh, I'm so glad to hear you. I think maybe this will help you." And she took them upstairs. She said, "I've rented this room on the mezzanine. Now you can go in there and have a meeting." And they said, "We don't know how to have a meeting." "What are you talking about? Aren't you going to come in and show us?" She said, "I'm not an alcoholic. I can't come. But here's the manuscript." So they sat down, and they looked around. One guy at the table had a shirt and tie on. The guy named Morty Josephs was his name. And he... I heard him tell the story. And they said, "You want to read something out of that book, that manuscript?" So he looked on the table of contents and found how it works. He said, "That ought to do it." And he read for a while, and that was the beginning of reading chapter 5. Nearly all of those guys drank again, of course, because they didn't have anything happen to them. They just heard something read to them. But a couple of years later, when they got the thing moving again, "Adam, where's my coffee?"
Right there.
Jesus. It's bad enough to forget where Matt is, but to forget where my coffee is, that's something. But they got started again, and they said, "Morty, why don't you read that part again that you read a couple of years ago?" He was one of the few survivors. And they did. And for maybe 25 years, they would read chapter 5 at meetings in Los Angeles. That's the only place they read it. Everybody else poo-pooed it. But then in the late 1950s, they started to hear different places. Now it's all over the world. But all because a guy did not know how to start an AA meeting and went down to the table of contents. So that's why we read chapter 5. The Singleness of Purpose, I certainly agree with most of the things Johnny said. I never put any cocaine up there. Although I may try it. I don't know. At my age, what could hurt, you know? But it's an interesting thing, because as he said very clearly and very well, the innate defense of every alcoholic in the world for the history of mankind has been, "But you don't understand. My case is different." And information has bounced off people like us for 4,000 years. People try to help us. At one time they thought people like us must be possessed by devils. They'd put them to death and been flogged and sent away, and just no answer at all. And even when I was born, a long time ago, not 4,000 years, but a long time ago, there was still no answer to alcoholism, although I didn't know it. Growing up in Wisconsin, little boy, I didn't know what alcoholism was. But there's still, the closest thing was something called the Keely Cure, where they gave you drinks with drugs in them. They made you terribly sick. Have another one. Pretty sure that you want another one? No, I don't believe so. Cured again. And then most of them lasted about as far as it took to get to the first bar without drugs and the alcohol, you know. And what makes Alcoholics Anonymous so unusual, people wonder, what is it in this book? What's special in this book? Nothing. There's nothing special in the book of Alcoholics Anonymous at all. It can be found in all sorts of places. Nothing to it at all. And to understand why Alcoholics Anonymous works, you have to kind of go back to a little bit of our history, which is where it started. Bill Wilson, as we all know, I'm sure everyone here, the newest member, knows that he had a spiritual experience in the Towns Hospital in New York. And as he awakened in the middle of the night, this dreadful, cynical, drunken, dying man, and screamed, "If there's a God, show yourself!" And he said, almost suddenly a light came on in the room, although no light came on. And then he could hear the wind blowing through closed windows. He just didn't know what to make of it. He thought, I'm going insane. I'm snapped. That's the end of it. I've lost my mind. Then it all dimmed down again. And he went to sleep. And in the morning he told the doctor, he said, "Doctor, did I go crazy?" The doctor said, "No, I don't think so, Bill." He said, "I don't know what it is, but you look different. Whatever you happen to you, hang on to it." And so he went off, and he came out of the hospital, and he associated with the guys, his friends who had visited him from the Oxford group. So he decided to go to the Oxford group. And the reason that's important is because of the very few people who ever had spiritual experiences. They are usually associated with church experiences, and they got involved in church work. But he didn't. He got involved going to the Oxford group because he thought he had a calling to help drunkards. And I'm sure there are a lot of young people here who are not familiar with what the Oxford group is. We know the name. But in 1907, there was a Lutheran minister in Pennsylvania who felt Christianity was getting too loose. There was no dedication anymore. No people willing to be crucified for their faith like in the first century. And he started an organization called the First Century Christian Association. And he didn't get a lot of enlistees, you know. Who wants to be crucified upside down and set on fire? But he had a little group of fanatics around Pennsylvania. After the First World War, he went to Europe, and for some reason or other, the students at Oxford University just ate this up. Oh, that's what we need. We need to be a fanatic about our faith. Wait a minute. It's so much so that they began to call it the Oxford Group rather than the First Century Christian Association. And he brought it back to the United States in the late 20s, and now it had the imprimatur of the Oxford University, so it had a little juice to it. And pretty soon there were Oxford groups all over the country, starting in 1929, 30, 31. And what it really evolved into was nice people, better type people, meeting in one another's homes, discussing how they could enhance their spiritual values, how they could come closer to Jesus' preachings and so on. And Bill Wilson went to this organization. It had nothing to do with stopping drinking at all. There just was a guy in there, Eddie, who had stopped drinking, and Roland before him. And Bill thought that was the organization was about. And for months, he would pick up street drunks and bring them to the Oxford group every day. And of course, the people in the Oxford group were less than thrilled with this, you know. I believe you're vomiting on my shoes, sir. You know, they were nice people. And about 6 months he did this. He'd bring people home. They'd have no place to sleep, but he just consumed with, I'm going to carry this message. And he got up one morning after about 6 months, and the guy he brought home the night before to help apparently had left early, taking the coffee pot with him so he could sell for wine. And he watched his wife, Lois, who'd been a society chic, society girl when he met her, now a little gray before her time and spent and drawn, and putting on her sweater with a patch on the sleeve to go to work in the basement of a cheap department store so she could pay the rent so he could run these fools over to the Oxford group every day. And he had a terrible wave of remorse. He turned to his wife and said, "Lois, I'm sorry. I thought that thing that happened to the town's hospital, I thought I had some kind of a calling to help drunkards. But apparently I don't. I have nothing. I've been taking them to meetings, I've been taking them to the Oxford group every day, bring them home, and not one person has stayed sober. And I'm all done doing it." He said, "I'm going to get a job tomorrow if it's just shoveling dirt. I'm going to get a job and I'm going to do something so you can stay home. I'm so sorry, darling, that I brought you to this. I'm not going to do it anymore." And your life and mine hung by a thread so thin it's hard to measure it. And she said something to him that changed the course of history. Most of us know what that was. I was having lunch with her about 30 years ago up in Connecticut. I said, "How did you ever think of that answer, Lois? What a great answer." He said, "Not one person has stayed sober." And she said, "You did." Oh, yeah. That's why old-timers don't have much hair in front. You just go through life going, "Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah." So he decided to try it again a little bit, but he had wanted to know what was wrong. And he went down to see his friend Dr. Silkworth in Towns Hospital, where he'd spent much of his time while drinking. And he said, "Doc, I just don't know what's happening. I'm trying to help these people." He explained what he'd done, taken the Oxford group. And the doctor said, "Well, you're doing it wrong, Bill. You're trying to sober these people up with religion. Alcoholics like you don't sober up on religion. Nobody ever sobered up on religion. What you've got to tell them is that maybe you understand how they feel, and apparently from what you say, drinking does something special for you it doesn't do for me and the rest of the people, and explain to them why you drink and what happens." And Bill said, "God, that doesn't sound like much of a message to carry." He said, "The doctor says, you got to get through that wall somehow." He said, "Okay, I'll try it." And he got home, and he was offered a job, for heaven's sake. He was offered a job. These guys called him in and said, "Bill, you were pretty successful here on Wall Street. You know the ropes about stocks. We're sending you out to Akron, Ohio to pick up the proxies of this machine tool company. And if we can get control of that baby, you'll be president. And your problems will be over. But if you screw up, you're on your own. Don't bother coming back even, because you'll never work around here again. We thought we could trust you." So Bill Wilson went out to Akron. And as we all know, the deal blew up in his face. And there he stood, day before Mother's Day of 1935, in a hotel in Akron. In the hotel lobby, reached in his pocket, got $10. He can either pay his hotel bill or buy a train ticket home. He thought, what the hell could I do? And I stood in that same spot some years ago trying to recreate, I'm kind of a romanticist. And over there's a door, and over the door is carved things as cocktails in orange neon. And he wrote later, he stood there and he heard this clink of glasses and music and laughter coming out of that door. And he had a thought that I dare say 95% of us would have, or maybe all of us. He thought, I'll just have a couple drinks, then I can think of an answer. Seems reasonable, doesn't it, for people like us? Because that's where the answers come. And he started to walk, and every step he took, your life diminished quickly. Mine, Johnny's, everybody's. And out of the corner of his eye, across the room, he saw some payphones against the wall. And above the payphones was a sign. In small-town hotels, they used to do that. Maybe they still do, for all I know. They put the leading churches and the ministers and their phone number in case you're spiritually bereft. So he remembered that he had promised his friends and his Oxford group friends that he would do no drastic actions till he got a hold of an Oxford group member. So we went over to this Oxford, saw the first name, put his nickel in, that's how much it cost. dialed it. Said, I'm a rum hound from New York. I have to talk to somebody in the Oxford group. And the voice said, I'm sorry, sir. I don't know what you're talking about. Please don't bother me. I'm trying to write a sermon. And hung up. And he called the next number. No answer. And he called the next number. No answer. And he called the next number. And the voice said, I can't help you. I don't know what I can't help you at all. I'm sorry. And I don't know about you, but I suspect you're like me. I think I might say, well, I did what I said I would. I tried. As he turned around, the bottom name on the list was a funny name. He caught his attention. Walter Tunk. So I should call Walter Tunk just to get screwed again one more time. So he called Walter Tunk, and by an odd coincidence, he was the only man in Akron who could have helped him at that moment. He said, funny you should call, sir. I have a parishioner. I'm just talking to her. She's a member of the Oxford group, and she was telling me that their group has a doctor who admitted he was an alcoholic this week, and they didn't know what to do with him. Perhaps I could put you in touch with them. Stay in that phone booth, and I'll call you back. So he called the parishioner, wealthy woman, out in West Akron. Turned out she was home. She said, yeah. Oh, yes, yes, that sounds interesting. Maybe I can get the doctor to go down and talk to him. She called the doctor's house. The phone rang and rang and rang and rang. Started to hang up, and all of a sudden, hello, I'm sorry I was out in the yard. That close to us dying. And the person explained what happened. She said, yes, I'd like to have my husband talk to this man. He's laying drunk on the floor. He can't do it today. He just came home drunk, and I can't do anything with him. But I'll bet we could meet with him tomorrow. I might get him in shape. So they made arrangements to go out to the wealthy woman's house the next day on Mother's Day. And the parishioner called back Walter Tunk. And Walter Tunk called back Bill Wilson. And just in the nick of time, because Bill was getting awfully edgy in that phone booth. I hadn't heard the word. And so the next day, Bill followed his directions he got and got in a streetcar and rode out to West Akron. And the doctor came out with his car. And, the doctor was very hungover. He was too hungover to drive. His son drove, 16-year-old son. You might have heard him talk. He became a very well-known Al-Anon many years later. Young Bob, they called him. He's dead now. He's died in his 80s, but he was young at one time. He was 16, and he used to talk about this moment. He was a good friend of mine, and he's driving the car out there at 16. His sister sitting in the seat next to him in the back. His father just grinding his mother. And I'm going to go out and talk to this guy, but I'm not going to sit and listen to any more damn lectures about my drinking. I've heard all the lectures I can stand. It makes me crazy, but it's Mother's Day, and I've ruined Mother's Day for you. So I'll go out there, I'll give him 10 minutes, but that's all I'm going to give him. I hope you understand that, Ann. And won't. They got out there, and these two guys got together, went into this room for their 10 minutes, stayed there 4 hours. And they came out, and Dr. Bob said to his wife, my God, Ann, that's the first man that ever seemed to know how I feel and why I drink. He didn't even talk to me about my drinking. He told me about how he felt. He said, my God, I believe I'm not so unique as I thought. He said, Bill, could you stay with us a couple of weeks and talk some more? And Bill thought, let's see. I have no way to get out of town. Yes, I can. So they stopped and spent 2 weeks talking about the spiritual values of the Oxford group, how they can enhance their spiritual understanding of God, how they can more closely follow the path of Jesus Christ, how they can get deeper into the salvation of the soul. At the end of 2 weeks, the doctor was feeling splendid. He hadn't had a drink. He said, Bill, I want you to stay with my family this weekend. This weekend there's a National Convention of the American Medical Association, Atlantic City. I was there last year and I was drunk, and they ridiculed me, just sent me out of there. But I want to go there this year and show them, by God, what we found. Stay with my family. I'll be back Tuesday morning. And away he went. Tuesday morning, 7 o'clock, phone rang. Mrs. Smith picked up, yes. There's a woman on the phone said, hello, this is Dr. Smith's office girl. I'm so sorry to tell you they carried the doctor off the train this morning so drunk he couldn't walk. And they laid him on the platform, and the station agent knew that I worked for him, so he called me, and I came down and got a cab driver, and we came and brought him back. He's laying on the floor of his office. I'm so sorry. He's crying. He's so remorseful. He said, but I suppose you want to come down and get him. I said, okay. So Bill and Mrs. Smith went down to get this crying, drunken fool, brought him home. I don't know of a more disgusting thing than a crying drunk. God, they're sickening. I'm so sorry. I really... Boom, boom. Now you're not. Yeah. Well, we don't do that very often. I mean, just once in a while. Adam, you're a wonderful young man. They brought him home and put him to bed. Now's the end of the noble experiment. And we were on our way to death again. And Thursday morning he said, what day is today? He said, it's Thursday morning, Bob. Oh, my God. I've got to do a cancer surgery today. Look at my hand. I can't hold a knife. My God, they'll take my license. I'm on thin ice anyway. My God, what am I going to do? So they got him up, and they bathed him, and they dressed him. His new friend Bill got him a couple drinks to steady his hand. And he went off to the hospital. So I'll be back about 2. At 2 o'clock, he didn't come back. 3 o'clock, he didn't come back. 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock. Everybody knew the old son of a bitch was drunk again, and all of a sudden, right after 6, he burst through the kitchen door. He says, I'm back! He says, where you been, Bob? You're cold sober? He said, when I was doing that surgery, it suddenly struck me, you know, the Oxford group wants people to make amends for their wrongdoings, but I thought that shouldn't apply to doctors because we all do the best we can. But I realized I'm a human being. I'm a human being first before I'm a doctor. So I've spent all afternoon making amends all over Akron. And I just feel wonderful. And that was June 10th, 1935, which we look back upon as our birthday of Alcoholics Anonymous. Although it wasn't the birthday of Alcoholics Anonymous, it was just 2 more boobs in the Oxford group staying sober. But they realized one thing. Talking about spiritual matters had not kept Dr. Bob sober. And they realized that isn't what had kept Bill sober either. What had kept him sober was trying to help people. So they found, Dr. Bob said, maybe there's someone in the Akron hospital. Because in those days you couldn't go to the hospital for alcoholism. You had to have physical problems, colitis or something that you could substantiate. And he called up his friend, head of the nurses up there, a nun named Sister Ignatia. Let me just tell you something about Sister Ignatia. Now, it's kind of dim because it's so long ago. But she spoke at the 1960 International Convention. And I listened to her talk. And I went up afterwards and thanked her. And I kissed her on the cheek. And then I thought, oh, I shouldn't have done that. I said, is it okay to kiss a nun on the cheek, sister? And she said, I think. As long as you don't get in the habit. Anyway, kind of long time ago, I can't remember every little detail. But anyway, she said, funny, we have a man in the hospital, a man named Bill D., who's a lawyer from Louisville who moved here a few years to get off drinking and can't, and he's drinking worse. And maybe you could talk to him. I'll have to talk to his wife to okay it. I heard him talk 50 years ago. He said, I was laying in that hospital in Akron, Ohio. And my wife said to me, there's two fellas who want to talk to you about your drinking. And I said, absolutely not. I'm sick of talking to people about drinking. I'm not going to talk to anybody else, give more lectures. I'm sick of it. But my wife's a strong woman. And I talked to those two fellas, and the funny thing was, they never talked to me about my drinking once. They talked about their drinking and how they felt and why they drank. I never heard anybody ever describe me so clearly. And I stuck with them fellers, and I've been with them ever since. And he became number 3 in the chain. And they had a terrible time in those early days, you know, because there weren't AA meetings you take them to. You took them to the Oxford group, where they'd hear all about the Bible. And then you'd have to try to talk to them personally. In fact, it's an interesting thing. In 1963, I guess, I was doing a job in New York. And I thought, I think I'll go over and see Bill Wilson. So I was the World Service Office on 44th Street at that time. So I'd like to see Bill Wilson. He said, well, he's booked up for 2 weeks in advance. You know, you have to get in advance. Okay. So I'm in the archives and stumbling through those things, and all of a sudden, here comes Bill Wilson. He said, are you the young man who wanted to come to see me? I said, yes, sir. He said, well, my 11 o'clock didn't show up. Come on in. And I sat down, and we talked for an hour. And I'd like to tell you what he said, but I don't remember. I remember what I said. We're the ones holding the doors for you. But the interesting thing of all was this. Near the end of our conversation, I said, you know, Bill, it kind of puzzles me. In our big book study group, we've been going into action this last week. And you go to deep specifics on how to tell a person to talk to them about how you're drinking, and how you feel, and how they feel, and so on. But you ever once talk about taking them to meetings? Don't you ever take people to meetings? You know, in Los Angeles, we did meetings every night. He said, young man, when I wrote that, there were no meetings. Kind of scary. If you went to a meeting, you heard Jesus talked about. So you had to get him aside and talk to him. You're not so different, because the whole thing that makes AA work is the conversation that gets you through that external you don't understand. The information in AA is grand, but it's universal. The fact is, how do you get through that wall to get it to the guy? And that's why it's so important, the singleness of purpose. But they, you know, Akron, they kind of stumbled. They had a few people come around, had a hard time. They'd lose them, get them, lose them. Just one little sidebar, may amuse you. They got a young guy, first young guy in AA, 29, Ernie. And they said, you can't be an alcoholic, you're only 29 years old, but you drink like an alcoholic, you can come with us. He goes around with them, went to the meetings, and he fell in love with Dr. Bob's daughter and brought our organization its first relationship. I don't know a single word that sends a shiver down a sponsor's spine like that word. I want to talk to you about my new relationship. Oh, Jesus. You have to have a little machine on your desk that says, put the phone down. And they say such touching things like, I know, Clancy, I thought the last one was the one, but God, when I saw Benny walking out of detox today, I just knew. But they got married. Which is a wonderful innocent. That same thing happened in my family. My youngest daughter, who Johnny knows, married a guy I sponsored who had 5 years sober, who Johnny knows, Tom. And I want to tell you the absolute epitome of mixed emotions. It's watching your daughter go down the aisle to marry a man whose fifth step you've heard. You can't really say anything, but you can give little clues. Let me know if he ever brings a sheep home, honey. And so they were very happy about it. They said, Ernie, you stay home now and take care of your wife. We'll keep doing these things, but you stay home now and be a good husband for a while, a few months. Maybe you'll be all right. So they were all sad and couldn't understand why he got drunk and turned her against AA for 50 years. But little by little, AA grew, as we knew. But it has always been predicated on the singleness of purpose. Johnny alluded to the Washingtonians, who had 100,000 sober drunkards in 5 years, and they got into other actions, and in 3 years they all died drunk. Singleness of purpose gets through that wall. That's the whole purpose of it. It's nothing magic, nothing spooky, nothing eerie, nothing religious. Get through that wall. I never really understood it completely until I was 2 years sober. And I was speaking at the club. I was very scrawny. I weighed about 125 pounds. I'd had my front teeth kicked out in the Phoenix jail, so I wasn't hitting those consonants quite as cleanly as I'd like. But I was on fire because I was staying sober for the first time ever in all these years I've been around. I was talking to a group on obsessions. I'm an authority on obsessions, not the recovery from obsessions, just the obsessions themselves. And some kind of plump woman came up and said, "That was wonderful," she said. "I never heard those talked about before. I've named a little group, Overeaters Anonymous, started a little organization, meets over at Christ the King Church on Olympic Boulevard. Could you come and talk to our ladies on Sunday?" I said, "Sure. Give them something to shoot for." So I went over there on Sunday, went in this room, about 8 fat ladies sitting around a table. And I gave my talk on obsessions, and I just ate them up. I sat down, I knew I'd help the poor things, and then they had a little sharing session, and I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Woman over here, her son just had his 10th birthday. He's at a military school in Long Beach. She sent her husband down to get him. When he went down there, she brought out this cake, took a little bite to make sure it was good, had another little bite, had another little bite. By the time they got back, she'd eaten the whole cake. And she felt so terrible about it. And I didn't say anything because I'm too nice a guy. But I wanted to say, why don't you just have a piece of cake and forget it, for Christ's sake? What's wrong with you, you know? And over here, there's a woman who talked about eating ice cream. She couldn't wait for her husband to go to work in the morning. He was a doctor. She'd go down to Thrifty Drugs and get some ice cream. And ice cream, just ate. I don't feel whole unless I'm... I didn't say anything because I'm a nice guy, but I thought, why don't you just have a dish of ice cream and forget it? What's wrong with you, you know? Over here, my favorite, she ate till she couldn't eat anymore. Then she put her finger down her throat and puked it up so she could eat some more. And I didn't say anything, but I wanted to say, don't bother shaking hands with me after Jesus. Now, I can see doing that for drinking, but not eating. I've done it for drinking a lot. God, Saturday afternoon, the sun's still up. Jesus. I'm a bright person. I have a good brain. I understood exactly what they were saying, but I didn't identify with it. So it was just aberrant behavior. Just aberrant behavior. And that's what you got to remember. No matter how hard you try to communicate, your loved ones will never really understand. It's always going to be a little bit of aberrant behavior. You can't even have a glass of wine at Christmas? That's ridiculous. No, I can't. Aberrant behavior. So you don't have to worry so much about making them identify and be caught up in your corner. Just have them wish you well. Because they don't understand. That's the whole nature of the operation here. The powerful singleness of identification. That's what it's about. If you do that, you will help someone. Without it, you'll watch your information bounce off the wall. No one ever learned from information. People learn from identification in this operation. So that is why you never want to get away from it. That's why I don't care how interesting the NA talk is. It's just information, or the CA talk, or the overeating talk, or any of the other talks. What I want to hear is some goof get up there and say, I've only been sober 2 weeks, but Jim is helping me, and I feel better. You bet your boots. So, keep it going. Thank you.